morning. So welcome to talking about the 1600s. Today we're talking about the Baroque, and this is not the only day we're going to do that, but today we're going to start by looking at the Baroque in terms of religion, and then later we'll look at the Baroque in terms of politics. Now, we're looking primarily at the 1600s, but there are a few artists who sneak a little earlier or a little later and are still Baroque. And the Baroque starts in Italy, but before we jump into some Italian artists, I want to point out to you that when we talk about Baroque religion, we're talking about the fallout from the Reformation and the Counter-Reformation. So in case your European history is a little rusty, the Reformation is when Martin Luther leaves the Catholic Church in the early 1500s. And all of a sudden, unlike the Middle Ages, when in Western Europe the only form of Christianity is the Catholic faith, you begin to have what we call Protestant Christians. So these include Lutherans and later Calvinists, and you'll eventually have Anglicans, Episcopalians, Presbyterians, and Baptists and Methodists. We can keep going for a long time. But this is that moment when there begin to become different types of Christianity. And as these different faiths fight over who is following Christ the best, for lack of a better term, they duke these battles out in art. So we're looking at art designed to say, we love Jesus more than you do. Which is an unfortunate product of the period, and there's actually a lot of religious warfare between these groups, arguing over which is the true form of Christianity in the 1600s. Historian Simon Schama actually at one point famously said that art in the 1600s is what he called the heavy artillery of these religious wars, and he may not be wrong. So Baroque art starts as the Catholic Church trying to win back supporters. And they are big on art that other forms of Christianity during this period are suspicious of. Other forms, especially Calvinists, believe that these images are some form of idol worship. However, Catholics are like, no way, they're a great recruitment tool. And they take that art from the Renaissance and Mannerism up a notch with the Baroque. Baroque is all about big, theatrical art. Let's look at our first Baroque artist. This is Domenichino, Italian for little Domenico, because apparently he was kind of short. So he comes from Bologna in Italy, where he trained with a guy named Carracci, who is an important transitional artist. And one of the things that's very Renaissance about this painting that I want you to notice is the light. All about theater in the Baroque period. So the sort of darkness of the stable, and then notice how baby Jesus is glowing, and his glow actually lights up Mary and the angels' faces. That's the sort of thing Baroque artists love. They love using light and shadows to give as much drama as possible. And remember, this is often designed for illiterate people. So you can figure out that the glowing baby, not your average baby, helps share that message with viewers. One of the female artists of this time period is Elisabetta Sirani. And she's another Italian with ties to the city of Bologna, where women actually had a lot more rights because they were able to go to university occasionally and sit in on classes. Sirani's an interesting individual because she trained with her father, and then her father developed crippling arthritis in his hands. So she actually becomes the head of his workshop and takes on female students and supports her parents, and she becomes really famous for being sort of a prodigy who's actually able to make these incredible paintings fairly quickly. Then she works herself into an early grave with heart failure. but that's a whole nother story we won't go into right now. I want you to notice this Madonna in Child, because once again, we have lots of darkness in the background. And this is not mannerism where there's like faces in the shadows. This is not the Renaissance where there's beautiful blurry fields in the backgrounds. Instead, it's Mary and baby Jesus glowing up front. That's that real Baroque light shadow play, what will be called chiaroscuro. I'll show you another example of that in a minute with Caravaggio. But first, I want to show you one more wild thing the Baroque people loved. This is Father Andrea Pozzo. And Pozzo was a Jesuit. It's what we call a member of the Society of Jesus, which was a group of really sort of friars, I suppose you'd say, during the Counter-Reformation, who were all about spreading the Catholic Church and supporting it while it struggled with other forms of Christianity for dominance. Pozzo was an architect and a painter, and he's famous for using what we call a quadratura technique to make flat spaces look 3D. So if you look at both of these, the ceiling on the left is not quite flat. That's actually a vaulted ceiling. But if you look at the ceiling on the right, that's a flat ceiling, and he makes it look like it has an incredible dome rising up into the heavens. This is what he does in Rome, and this is all what we call trompe-l'oeil, eye trick paintings. And this sort of mannerist trickiness mixed with angels and drama of religion. And that's Baroque-tastic. Even more Baroque-tastic is the painting on the right. I just said right when I meant left. I'm so sorry. The gold one. And this is from later in Pozzo's career in 1703 when he's at Vienna, where he painted a Jesuit church at the university. And if you look at the center there, what looks like a dome, not a dome. Actually just part of a curved ceiling like the other vaults. So would have been sort of a rando U shape, and instead he's going to make that beast look like there's a fake dome. Oh, Father Pozzo. Amazing. These kind of tricks to impress you with the majesty of the Catholic faith. That's what Baroque's all about. So one of the most important and famous, and actually kind of shady, of our Baroque artists is Michelangelo da Caravaggio. Not Michelangelo the Ninja Turtle. That was Michelangelo Buonarroti. This is Michelangelo who did Prison Time. He's a little different. But that's also going to be a guy who's hunted down on the lam for committing more than one potential homicide. In spite of this, he's actually famous for his religious art. Some would argue because of it. Classic story of sinner seeking redemption. At any rate, Caravaggio is famous for this, what we call chiaroscuro. That's chiaroscuro. And that's this really heavy use of light and shadow to make a point. So the same way with Domenichino, we saw baby Jesus glowing. Check out the calling of Matthew on the right-hand side here. This is Jesus on the far right. You can just see his halo. And he's pointing at Matthew, who's going, who, me? And the fact that he's mostly dark and then they put the light on the hand, can you see the light actually follows a diagonal line to Matthew, who's pointing at his chest going, me? This is the sort of thing Caravaggio's famous for. Or check out, just like Mannerists on the left, we have a very crowded painting, but you have a lot more darkness. This is to make it look very dramatic. And these canvases are huge. Much of Caravaggio's work is gigantic, like movie screen size gigantic. And so it has this dramatic effect. One of the things Caravaggio especially is famous for is using everyday people as models instead of professionals, noted for their beauty. And during the Counter-Reformation, the Catholic Church loved this because it's trying to speak to everyday people. It's trying to recruit everyday people. So it enjoys having people go, oh my gosh, that guy who's Matthew looks like me. And when he's talking to Matthew, this is what a bar in Rome would have looked like all the time at the time. So people are dressed in 1600s clothes. They're in 1600s settings. And part of that is that propaganda, that recruiting. There were a bunch of followers of Caravaggio and his techniques playing with light and shadow, his heavy use of chiaroscuro. Most of them, however, were male. One of the rare examples we have of a female Caravaggista, female follower of Caravaggio, is Artemisia Gentileschi. And Artemisia has an incredible life story because she trained with her father, another famous painter, Orazio, and one of her father's other workshop attendants, we know, raped her and then promised he'd make it okay and salvage her honor by marrying her, and then went back on his word and called her a prostitute, and really sort of stalked her. If you read the court records, it's incredibly creepy and unpleasant. And she actually takes him to court and is tortured with thumb screws, and sticks to her word and manages to prosecute him for assault. And it's incredibly brave to stand up as a survivor of sexual assault in modern court systems, with a lot of blame shuffled onto survivors. But if you can imagine doing that in the 1600s, it gives you an idea how tough Artemisia was. Her most famous paintings, and she did 6 on this theme, show the story of Judith slaying Holofernes. Judith is a heroine from some of the deuterocanonical or apocryphal texts in the Bible, where she is supposed to be a young Jewish woman in the Old Testament who is saving her people by seducing and then decapitating, murdering an evil invader of her home country, this man Holofernes. So she's the woman in the yellow dress, and her maid is helping her chop this guy's head off to save her people. If you look at a lot of male artists' pictures of Judith, they look very like, oh, oops, did I cut someone's head off? I'm so delicate and beautiful. But people were impressed by Artemisia's because instead, like, she's got strong arms, she's holding him down, and she looks like she's really working it, sawing through those neck muscles. There are legends, which aren't really substantiated, we don't know for sure, that she made Judith look like herself and she put her rapist's face over Holofernes. And those rumors have persisted for years. But she did more than one identical version of this painting and other images of Judith that are very famous. And those rich colors and that dark background are part of what make her famous for being Caravaggio-style chiaroscuro painter. The Baroque period is going to go from Italy to Spain, and part of that transition comes from the southern Italian city of Naples. The Kingdom of Naples was actually under control of the Spanish crown during that period, and so you have a number of Spanish artists who spend their career in Naples during the 1600s. One of the most famous is Giuseppe de Ribera. And Ribera was nicknamed by the Italians the Little Spanish Man. And the the Spanish would have called him a tenebrist for playing with candlelight and shadow, whereas the Italians would have said he's flirting with chiaroscuro. But tenebrists in Spain aren't just playing with light and shadow in terms of chiaroscuro style technique. They're using some dark themes. So usually if you're seeing a Spanish Baroque artist who's a tenebrist, you're not just looking at these dark, gloomy paintings like we see on the Ribera slide, although you're seeing that. You're also seeing probably a saint being tortured for their faith in really uncomfortable ways. So St. Andrew there, famous for being crucified on an X, notice he's sitting up being tortured and tied down, and we're getting kind of graphic, and that's actually one of the least graphic paintings. A lot of medieval martyr paintings have like smiley saints while they're being tortured. Not gonna see that in the Spanish Baroque. Ribera hung out with a wild crowd famous for actually beating up their rival painters. And he's famous for not just these really intense Baroque saint murders, but he had a strange thing for painting images of what he called bearded women. Go figure. We know that just like the Mannerist period, during the Baroque, they were really interested in people with unusual lives and images. And you can see how some of that lingered. We'll talk about more Spanish painters in the next video.